The hallway froze when a loud crash echoed against the lockers. Kayla Whitmore staggered, her books scattering like fallen leaves. Chad Renshaw's sneer cut through the silence. No one spoke, no one moved, until the echo of motorcycle engines in the distance promised this wasn't over. Before we start this story, tell us, where in the world are you watching this from? And if you enjoy our stories, please like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss another story of human and bikers' kindness. Hillsborough High was like any other small-town school: creaky lockers, fluorescent lights, the faint smell of bleach mixed with cafeteria pizza. But for Kayla Whitmore, each day felt heavier than it should. Whispers followed her down hallways. Some kids laughed too loudly when she passed. It wasn't just that she was different. It was the way she carried herself, chin high, quiet confidence, skin tone that set her apart in a mostly white town. And in Hillsborough, old prejudices had a way of sticking around. She tried to focus on art, sketchbook always tucked under her arm. Drawing was her refuge, her way of softening the world's edges. Still, the weight of being watched never left. Her father, Duke Whitmore, was known in Hillsborough too, but for very different reasons. As captain of the local Hells Angels chapter, his name carried respect, fear, and legend. Kayla never flaunted it. She wanted to be known for who she was, not who rode beside her. In English class, Ms. Laura Green noticed Kayla's talent. Her essays were sharp, her sketches tucked into the margins alive with detail. "You've got an eye for truth," Ms. Green told her once. Kayla smiled faintly but said nothing. Compliments rarely outweighed whispers. At lunch, Chad Renshaw and his friends dominated a corner table. Chad was the star quarterback, his father a councilman who never hid his disdain for outsiders. To Chad, cruelty wasn't just casual, it was inherited. That afternoon, as Kayla crossed the cafeteria, Chad's voice carried. "Careful, Whitmore. Don't want to trip over your own shadow." His buddies laughed. Kayla ignored him, but her chest tightened. She sat alone, flipping open her sketchbook. Lines became armor, pencil strokes her shield. Ethan Harrington, a quiet ninth grader, slid into the seat across from her. "Don't listen to him," he whispered. "He's scared of anything he doesn't understand." Kayla gave a small nod. Sometimes kindness was the loudest rebellion. Still, Chad's stare promised more to come. That evening, Kayla sat on the porch swing outside their modest home on Hillsborough's edge. The sound of crickets filled the warm air. In the distance, the low thunder of Harleys rolled along the highway, a rhythm she had grown up with. Duke Whitmore emerged from the garage, wiping grease from his hands. Tattoos crawled up his arms, leather vest patched with years of loyalty. To the world, he was a Hells Angels captain. To Kayla, he was just Dad, stern but tender in ways few ever saw. "You all right, kid?" he asked, settling beside her. Kayla hesitated. "Yeah. Just school stuff." Duke studied her face. He didn't press. He knew battles best fought on one's own, and battles where backup mattered. Instead, he handed her a bandana, worn but clean. "Keep this close. Remind yourself who you are." Kayla tucked it into her sketchbook, her safe place. She didn't know yet how soon she'd need that reminder. The next morning, the school buzzed with chatter about Friday night's football game. Chad Renshaw basked in attention, retelling plays with exaggerated swagger. His friends circled him like satellites, laughing at every jab he threw. Kayla slipped through the hall, sketchbook in hand. Ethan walked beside her, chattering about superheroes. He was one of the few who didn't treat her like a shadow. At her locker, Kayla noticed crude words scrawled across the metal: "Go home." The letters dripped with fresh marker. Her stomach twisted, but she exhaled slowly, pulling out her sketchbook. If they wanted her broken, they'd be disappointed. Still, whispers spread as students passed. Chad leaned against the wall, smirking. Looks like someone's not welcome. Ms. Green appeared, frowning. Clean that off, Chad. He shrugged. Wasn't me. But his smirk lingered, and the message remained. Kayla closed her locker calmly, eyes steady. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of flinching. But deep down, she knew the storm was building. By midweek, tension had sharpened into something palpable. Teachers avoided confrontation. Students stayed silent. It was as if the entire school was waiting for something to snap. In gym class, Kayla sat on the bleachers tying her shoes when Chad sauntered over. What's the matter, Whitmore? Too scared to play with the rest of us? She ignored him, lacing tighter. Chad crouched closer, voice low. You think you belong here? You don't. People like you never do. Kayla's hands trembled, but she lifted her chin. I belong wherever I decide. Chad's smirk faded into something darker. He leaned closer, menace in his tone. We'll see about that. Ethan spotted the exchange from across the gym, worry etched on his face. He knew Chad's threats weren't idle. Ms. Green blew the whistle, calling class to order. The moment broke, but Kayla's chest stayed tight. She sensed it now, Chad wasn't done. And when he made his move, it wouldn't be words. Thursday morning, the hallways buzzed with restless energy. Chad's swagger grew louder, his friends orbiting him like moths around a flame. Students parted when he passed, not out of respect but fear. Kayla kept her eyes forward, sketchbook clutched to her chest. Ethan trailed behind, whispering nervously. Don't let him get to you. At her locker, she flipped it open, pulling out her history book. Then, slam. The metal door crashed shut beside her, the echo ringing through the hall. Chad leaned in, smirking. Still here, Whitmore? Thought you'd have figured out you don't belong. Kayla didn't flinch. She slid her book into her bag calmly. I belong more than you do, Chad. At least I earned it. His eyes narrowed. Around them, students froze, whispering. Ethan stepped closer, protective but small. Leave her alone. Chad sneered at the boy, then back at Kayla. You'll regret that. The warning wasn't idle. It was a promise. By lunchtime, rumors had spread. Some swore Chad was planning to make an example of Kayla. Others stayed quiet, unwilling to cross him. Kayla sat alone at her usual table, sketching furiously. Pencil strokes carved strength into paper even as her stomach knotted. Ethan slid across from her, eyes darting. He's telling people he's gonna corner you after school. Kayla exhaled. She wanted to believe it was just talk, but Chad's smirk in the cafeteria told her otherwise. Jonas Whitmore, her father, had always warned her, hate only grows in silence. Tonight, she considered telling him everything. But part of her resisted. She didn't want to be the reason he unleashed the storm he carried. When she glanced up, Ms. Green was watching. The teacher's face was pale, concern written in her eyes. Kayla wondered if she would step in when the time came, or look away, like so many others. Either way, the moment was coming fast. The final bell rang. Students spilled into the halls, laughter bouncing off lockers. But Kayla felt the shift, something darker thrummed beneath the noise. She rounded the corner toward her locker. Chad waited, leaning casually against the metal doors, two of his friends flanking him. Well, look who showed, he sneered. Didn't think you'd have the guts. Kayla stopped, Ethan frozen at her side. She held her sketchbook tight, her shield against his stare. Chad's smirk hardened. With a sudden shove, he slammed her against the lockers. Books tumbled from her arms, the crack of impact echoing down the corridor. Gasps erupted. "Stay down," he growled. "This is my school. My rules." Pain radiated through her shoulder, but Kayla's eyes burned, not with fear, but defiance. She stood, steadying herself, voice sharp. "You don't get to decide where I belong." The hall buzzed with whispers. And outside, faint but unmistakable, came the low growl of approaching Harleys. The sound built slowly, like a storm rolling closer. Heads turned toward the windows as sunlight glinted off chrome. Students pressed against glass, murmuring in awe. Chad froze, his hand still gripping Kayla's arm. "What the?" Engines thundered into the lot, one after another, until nearly a dozen bikes lined up outside Hillsborough High. At the front was Duke Whitmore, helmet tucked under his arm, eyes like stone. Behind him, men in leather vests sat astride Harleys, silent and unyielding. The hallway vibrated with tension. Kayla straightened, pulling free from Chad's grasp. For the first time, she smiled. "You really should have thought this through," she said softly. Chad's face paled. Around him, his friends backed away. The roar outside grew louder, echoing into the halls. Teachers rushed out of classrooms, shouting orders, but no one moved. All eyes were on the girl against the locker, and the father who had come for her. The doors burst open. Duke Whitmore strode in, boots heavy on tile, leather vest marked with decades of loyalty. The hall went silent. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to make Chad stumble backward. "Is there a problem here?" Duke's voice was low, controlled steel. No one answered. Students shrank back, teachers frozen. Kayla stepped forward, rubbing her shoulder where the locker had bruised her. She lifted her chin. "Nothing I couldn't handle." Duke's gaze swept the hall, then landed on Chad. "You put your hands on my daughter." Chad's mouth opened, but no sound came. His swagger was gone, replaced by the cold realization of who he had crossed. Duke leaned closer, voice dropping to a growl. "There are rules in this world, boy. And you just broke the wrong one." The second rehook hit, the moment Chad realized this wasn't a schoolyard fight anymore. It was Judgment Day. Duke didn't need to raise his voice. His silence was heavier than any shout. The hall stretched tight with tension, lockers and faces pressed in on Chad, who now looked smaller than ever. Kayla stayed by her father's side, her hand still clutching her sketchbook. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was standing. Chad's friends melted into the crowd, eager to disappear. But Chad forced a laugh, thin and brittle. "What, you gonna hit me? That'll look real good, biker man." Duke's stare didn't waver. "I don't raise fists to children. But I do raise my brothers." As if on cue, the double doors opened again. More Hell's Angels walked in, silent, deliberate, boots echoing like a drumbeat. Their presence filled the corridor until every whisper died. Chad's laughter dissolved. Students held their breath. Kayla glanced around, realizing something new. This wasn't just her fight anymore. The entire school was watching history turn. And for once, prejudice stood on the losing side. Ms. Green pushed through the crowd, her voice unsteady. "Enough. Everyone back to class." But her command carried little weight against the gravity in the hallway. Duke looked at her, calm but firm. "This is your school. You should have stopped this long before today. Her face flushed. Shame flickered across her features. For months she'd turned away, hoping tension would fade on its own. Now, confronted by leather vests and a bruised girl holding her ground, she felt the weight of silence. Kayla's voice cut the air, steady but sharp. It's not just about me. How many times has this happened, and no one said a word? The question landed heavy. Students shifted uncomfortably. Some lowered their eyes, others nodded quietly. For the first time, Ms. Green didn't look away. "You're right," she whispered. The second climax had begun, not fists, but voices rising where silence once reigned. And Duke's presence made sure those voices couldn't be ignored. The sheriff arrived minutes later, flanked by 2 deputies. The sight of Hell's Angels filling a high school hallway left him pale. He tugged at his belt nervously. "What's going on here?" Duke stepped forward slowly. "A boy put his hands on my daughter. We came to make sure it doesn't happen again." The sheriff's eyes flicked to Chad, who stood trembling, his bravado stripped away. "That true?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Dozens of students spoke at once. "He slammed her. He's been harassing her all year." The sheriff's gaze hardened. For years, he'd overlooked the Renshaw family's influence. But tonight, the tide had shifted. Too many eyes, too many witnesses. He motioned to his deputies. "Take him in." Gasps filled the hall. Chad sputtered, "You can't. My dad." But his protests drowned under the sound of applause from students who had waited too long for justice. The third climax struck, the untouchable bully finally touched by consequence. As deputies led Chad away, Duke turned back to the crowd. His voice carried, steady as an oath. "Remember this. Hate thrives when good people stay quiet. Don't let silence write your story." The words pierced deeper than anger ever could. Students straightened, some clapping softly, others nodding. Even teachers, long silent, shifted with newfound resolve. Kayla stood at his side, bandana tucked in her sketchbook. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt seen. Ethan approached timidly, placing a hand on her arm. "You were brave." She smiled faintly. "Not alone, Ethan. Never alone." The angels began to file out, their presence leaving behind an echo stronger than any fistfight. In that silence, Hillsborough High changed. The whispers that once mocked Kayla turned into murmurs of respect. And deep inside, Chad's absence spoke louder than his threats ever had. The second rehook landed. Kayla wasn't just defended. She had become a symbol. That night, Kayla sat on the porch again, sketchbook open. The bandana lay across her lap, its edges frayed from years of use. She traced its threads with steady fingers. Duke joined her, lowering into the swing with a sigh. "You didn't need me today, kid. You already stood tall." She looked at him, eyes shining. "Maybe. But I'm glad you showed up anyway." Duke chuckled softly. "That's what family does. We don't let each other stand alone." In the distance, headlights traced the horizon. The angels were dispersing back to their homes, but their loyalty lingered in the air. Kayla sketched the scene, the line of bikes, her father at the center, the crowd watching. Not as intimidation, but as a reminder, strength is standing for what's right, not who's strongest. She closed the book gently. For the first time, she wasn't sketching to escape. She was sketching to remember. And Hillsborough would remember too. The next morning, Hillsborough buzzed with talk of the arrest. Parents debated in grocery aisles, students posted shaky videos online, and whispers about Kayla carried not scorn but admiration. At school, the crude writing on her locker had been scrubbed clean. Instead, a folded note rested inside, "We're with you." Dozens of signatures filled the page. Kayla's chest tightened. For so long, she had walked alone. Now, silence had broken. Ms. Green approached during homeroom, her voice firm for once. "Kayla, I want you to know, I should have done more. From today forward, I will." Kayla nodded, grateful but steady. "Then let's start now." Outside the window, the distant sound of Harleys rolled across the town. Students craned their necks, eyes wide, as Duke and a line of riders cruised slowly past the school. They didn't stop, didn't need to. Their presence said enough. Clearwater's silence had been broken. Hillsborough's silence was now gone too. That weekend, the Angels hosted a charity ride through Hillsborough. Families lined Main Street, waving as bikers thundered past. Children held handmade signs, "Respect. Courage. No more hate." Tara Winslow, Ethan's mother, squeezed her son's shoulder as the convoy rolled by. "You see, Ethan? This is what real strength looks like." Ethan grinned. Like Kayla. At the front of the ride, Duke glanced over his shoulder. Kayla perched proudly on the back of his bike. Her sketchbook was tucked safely into her bag, but she didn't need to hide behind it anymore. The crowd's cheers weren't just for the bikers. They were for her, for the girl who had stood against hate and didn't back down. For the first time, Kayla felt the town's gaze not as weight, but as wings. And riding with her father, she realized she was part of something bigger than fear. That evening, the Angels gathered at the Whitmore home. Bikes lined the gravel driveway, chrome glinting in the sunset. Laughter and conversation drifted from the porch, mixing with the smell of grilled food. Kayla sat among them, no longer the quiet girl sketching in solitude, but part of the circle. Rex Dalton, Duke's right hand, handed her a patch, small, not the full insignia, but one word stitched in bold, "Family." Her eyes brimmed. "I didn't earn this." Rex shook his head. "You stood when it mattered. That's what earns it." Duke watched silently, pride shining beneath his tough exterior. Kayla pinned the patch to her backpack. It wasn't about leather or chrome, it was about belonging. When night fell, the engines rumbled again, each rider lifting 2 fingers in silent salute as they departed. Kayla stood on the porch, clutching the patch. For the first time, she knew the road ahead was hers too. In the weeks that followed, Hillsborough High shifted. The whispers died. Teachers enforced rules they once ignored. Students who had stayed silent now spoke out. Kayla noticed the difference most in the little things: a classmate saving her a seat, someone holding open a door, Ethan grinning as he bragged, "She's braver than any superhero." One afternoon, Ms. Green asked Kayla to present her art at the school assembly. She agreed, and when she stepped on stage, the auditorium hushed. Her sketches, of engines, of her father, of the day she stood against Chad, flashed on the screen. Gasps rippled. Applause followed. Kayla spoke clearly. "Hate will always try to shove us down. But standing tall, together, changes everything." The ovation was thunderous. Duke sat in the back row, arms folded, eyes glistening. For once, Kayla wasn't just his daughter. She was her own force. That night, Kayla sat on her porch swing again, sketchbook resting on her lap. She opened to the newest page, a drawing of herself, standing tall against lockers, her father's silhouette behind her, engines roaring in the distance. Duke joined her quietly, laying a hand on her shoulder. "You changed this town, kid." Kayla smiled. "No, Dad. We did. The sound of engines drifted faintly across Hillsborough, not a threat, but a promise. Ethan's laughter floated from the yard, his voice carrying, "Kayla's the bravest." And for once, Kayla believed it. Sometimes courage is quiet. Sometimes it's a girl refusing to break, even when shoved against cold steel. And sometimes, it's a father and his brothers standing beside her, proving hate has no place here. Kayla's story reminds us, family is loyalty, and loyalty is strength.